Star year 3106. Humans and the Xlox did not get along. It wasn't that the species hated each other, not that, but there was an icy distance, the knowledge that if the other required help, that it was best to ask others before turning to each other. No one could say when it started, that icy distance, but everyone knew that it hadn't been just one incident, but many. Small missteps and skirmishes over planets that caused the friction between the two species. Everyone agreed that the icy distance was preferable to the earlier days where the two species would always clash. It always seemed inevitable. If you have a human ship and an Xlox ship, eventually someone would fire first. Even on an individual level, if you had an Xlox and a human in the same area, a fight would break out. Always fighting over which planets to terraform, who was trespassing where, who insulted the other first. After a few years of intense fighting and near war, the Galactic Council finally stepped in. A peace treaty was signed in the human year 3035, both sides eyeing each other with heavy distaste as the terms were agreed upon. An icy distance then separated them. The two species pointedly ignored each other. Not even individuals of the species crossed paths and acknowledged each other. If anyone asked, no one really got a firm answer as to why. Humans said the Xlox were stuck-up, arrogant, bully assholes who couldn't be respectful to save their lives. Xlox said that humans were primitive, brutish, thieving bastards who should have stayed on their home planet. But both species stuck to that distaste and iciness. If they had to be together, they were either stone-faced or they were sneering behind each other's back. But it was better than fighting, especially for the Galactic Council. It was just easier to have them separate. The two predator species going at each other made the more sedate species of the Council nervous. The iciness was better, barely, but better nonetheless. It also helped everyone plan for it. They could keep them separate. Colonies near Xlox planets would only rely on the Xlox for exports and imports. The ones near human planets only relied on the humans. It was easier, safer. That wall of ice held. For over 70 years it held. Xlox on one side, humans on the other. The distinction and separation was firm, and it would have stayed that way if not for two ships. One, an Xlox civilian cruiser, and the other, a human cargo freighter. The two should have never met, not in any circumstances, but on one fateful journey they both took. They did. And it changed everything. When humans strapped themselves to massive ships and flung themselves into the stars to start terraforming other planets in the year 2506, it was called the pinnacle of human innovation. However, old habits died hard. The time-tested habits formed by sailors and captains of the seas and oceans of Earth carried across to the stars. Superstitions, beliefs, and thought processes that once gripped ships on water then gripped ships that flew through the cosmos. Mattie Reyes was from a long line of sailors and captains. Her family could trace her history of working ships all the way to when humans first left Earth 600 years prior. Generations of ship workers, sailors, and dock workers. Her father was even a well-known captain for an elite human company called Standard Galactic Shipping. He wanted his children to take after him. Mattie was the only one that did. She started as a dock worker, and then she moved up in rank and position until she had captained ships for many different cargo companies. She had experience, a lot of it, especially moving through some of the more dangerous areas of space, asteroid belts or ice fields. She was something of an expert. So when she finally, after years of saving and planning, managed to have her dream ship built, she was ecstatic. It was a mid-sized cargo freighter with a double-shielded hull and twin fusion core engines. Her top speed was 648 universal space knots. It was fairly hefty for a cargo ship, but Mattie had insisted.
She started her own company, and she would never forget the look of pride on her father's face when he saw the ship. He had clapped her on the shoulder and told her she did well. Never forget how unforgiving space can be, Mattie. Remember, it is no man's land out there. You do your duty, but you never forget what makes you a raise. He had tapped her chest, above her heart. You have the heart of a sailor and a soul helped by our ancestors. Never forget what that means. You are one hell of a captain, my girl. Mattie never forgot the line of sailors and captains that came before her. She took her ship and her crew on over 600 different routes and journeys. They never failed to deliver. She was proud of that record, more than proud of it. But she never forgot everything her father taught her, not about how dangerous space could be, not about how she always needed to do what was right.
She picked up stranded ships, usually small cruisers with spent cores. She welcomed them aboard, towed their ships behind her, or stuck them in the cargo hold when it had room. After all, space was unforgiving, just like the seas and oceans of Earth, and it was only right to help those who needed it. It wasn't right to leave them to the harshness of space when help was possible. It was exactly that mindset that had Mattie calling for a slowdown of the engines when the garbled SOS came through. She waved her hand, silencing the laughing crew on the bridge as she turned up the radio and tried to tune into the signal. It was filled with static, the noise of space interfering with the transmission, but words slowly started to come through. Mattie knew the language. She wrinkled her nose. X-Lock SOS. The distaste was familiar. How far is it pinging from? She asked, looking toward her navigator, Gregory. 1066.4 universal space miles, he replied, glancing over with his brows furrowed, coming from near the Axiom asteroid belt. That had Mattie grimacing. That asteroid belt was notorious for being unpredictable. It liked to fling out ship-crushing asteroids without warning. It was exactly why she had chosen the route she was on, safer all around. Can you ping any other vessels, Navarra? She asked, glancing toward her radar specialist. The whip-thin woman was already tapping on screens, her fingers flying across buttons. There is one pinging from the HFY system that's reading as X-Lock, and it's over 1,400 USM away, Navarra said. But their readings seem to be picking up speed. She turned to look at Mattie, and Mattie nodded. Okay, then we should be all right. Any notes on what they're saying? The language wasn't one she needed a translator for, and she hadn't bothered turning one on. She had no use for X-Locks. They liked undercutting her shipping ventures and snatching contracts from her. I'll adjust it. Her first mate, Hawker, a werewolf-type male from a species called the Jiba, moved over and started fiddling with dials. The signal grew louder, clearer, finally running through a secondary translator. Knocked us off course. An asteroid has breached the hull and we can't contain the damage. The sun's gravity is tearing us in half. Please, we have podlings on board. Anyone who can hear this, please, please save us. We don't have much time. The gravity is too strong. All the escape pods will be dragged down. We have podlings and civilians on board. Please. The words were desperate, begging. And Mattie had never heard an X-Lock beg before. Not like that, not with that word, not said so many times. Everyone froze, and all eyes turned to her. Mattie blinked once. The sun. What sun? How much time do they have? She looked to Gregory, who was already pulling up holo maps. Star B105, strong gravity, he said. It's what causes the asteroids to fling around on that side of the belt. They have less than 2 hours if the ship is already caught in the gravity well. His voice was gruff, and he cleared his throat as the realization settled over the bridge. The X-Lock ship was too far away. They won't make it. The words left Mattie in a small whisper,
as she stared at the hollow image of the star. "The X-Lock ship won't make it." She turned, her mind already made up. "Shift course, follow the beacon. We need to get there." They were closer. They had a better chance of reaching them. "But we would need to cross into the asteroid belt," Haker started. "There are children on board." Maddie whirled on him, her voice rising. "I have never heard an X-Lock beg before, and there are children. We can make it. We can give them a chance. Full speed ahead. Get us to them." She was already running from the bridge toward the engine room. The ship shuddered beneath her feet as she burst through the doors. "Divert all unnecessary power to the fusion cores. We need to top out her speed." Her voice echoed through the room. "We have less than 2 hours. There is a ship out there that needs us. We have to get there as fast as we can." It was a long shot. Her ship could only go 648 universal space knots, and that was on paper. But they would get there. She had to believe they could squeeze out more. She rushed back to the bridge. The ship was already altering course, vibrations rippling through the deck as the fusion cores began to hum louder, more power pouring into them. She grabbed the intercom. "We have a ship in distress. We are diverting course to rescue the escape pods and anyone we can. Convert the mess hall into an infirmary. Do whatever you can to maximize speed and response time." She cut the comm and moved to the radio. "We are coming. Hold on. We are on our way. Keep signaling your position." She sent the message through the same channel as the SOS, her heart pounding hard in her chest. She barked out a few more orders before running toward the small civilian section. They only had a dozen passengers, but she wanted them informed. 10 minutes later, the crew was prepping the mess hall for casualties. Maddie returned to the bridge. They were approaching their top speed, but it felt like time was racing ahead while they crawled through space. "We need more speed," she said. She looked at Haker. He glanced at her, then looked away.
"The cargo. We could put a tracker on it and jettison it. It would decrease our weight by nearly a third." That was all Haker had to say before Maddie nodded. The cargo was heavy, expensive, critical to contracts and profit margins, but it wasn't priceless. It wasn't worth lives. "Let's do it." She was already moving, sprinting toward the cargo bay. By the time she reached it, the crew was ahead of her, strapping the cargo together, shouting over one another that they should jettison to gain speed. "Trackers?" she shouted as she grabbed a strap and hauled it tight alongside them. "Aye, Captain." The response came as a chorus. Less than 5 minutes later, she and the cargo workers were behind the safety glass of the upper control room. Maddie slammed her hand down on the control panel. The cargo hatch opened. Tons of freight spilled into the void, tumbling away into darkness. She felt the ship shudder beneath her boots, then lurch like a runner finally shedding a weight vest. "Come on, girl, you can do it," she murmured as the hatch sealed shut again. She slapped the comm. "Haker, where are we at?" "We're climbing, 680 US knots," he snapped back. Maddie nodded once. "Get to the mess hall." She ushered the cargo workers out and was already moving again, heading straight for the engine room. They needed more power, more speed. "Anything else?" she demanded as she burst inside. The engines whined, the sound strained and uneven. The engineers exchanged looks. "We could seal off the mess hall and divert all emergency and life support power to the cores," one of them said carefully. "But it could cause the fusion housings to crack. They could explode. The entire ship could explode." Maddie swallowed once. Then she turned to the wall comm. "Everyone to the mess hall. All priority personnel suit up. All emergency and life support power is being diverted to the fusion cores. Gregory, keep us straight. Navarra, watch for anomalies and keep us alive. Haker, you keep her true." The orders came fast, clipped, absolute. "Wait, where are you going to be?" Hacker's voice carried confusion and worry in equal measure. "I'll be down here with the engines."
She didn't wait for his reply. Maddie grabbed 3 emergency suits from the wall, tossing 2 to the human engineers, Tate and Marie. She pulled hers on in one practiced motion. The fusion core chamber glowed a harsh yellow. Maddie stepped inside without hesitation, her breathing loud in her helmet as she moved toward the control banks. The moment Tate's voice crackled through her suit. "All clear, everyone's suited," she began. One switch at a time. Life support shut down across non-essential sections. Emergency power rerouted. Systems screamed in protest. Each heavy lever snapped into place with a metallic crack. The ship shuddered. The yellow glow deepened to green. Maddie kept going. Then, with the final switch, the cores flared blue. Not stable blue. Hungry blue. The energy warped, twisting in on itself as the engines roared like wounded beasts. The entire ship vibrated so violently it was hard to stay upright. "Captain, we're coming apart!" Hacker shouted in her rear. Maddie staggered back through the doorway. Tate and Marie looked at her through their visors. They nodded. They understood. "Then we fall apart and get there in pieces," Maddie shouted back, "but we get there in time." The engine screamed, a sound that cut through bone and soul. It sounded like a ship giving everything it had, begging physics for just one more fraction of speed. Maddie didn't know how many souls were trapped aboard that X-Lock vessel, but if they saved even one, even just one, it would be worth it.
"Come on, hold together, girl." Maddie staggered across the violently shaking floor toward the remaining stand-up panel. It flashed red with alarms, every tone screaming imminent failure. The fusion cores were past their limits, unstable, screaming for relief, but Maddie knew they could not slow down. They needed more time. "Captain, we can't sustain!" "Haker!" Her shout cut through the channel like a blade. "If she flies apart, then let her. I'll see you in the great beyond, but we will make it in time." Her heart thundered as she reached the panel and began overriding safeguards, bypassing alarms, ripping away the systems designed to keep the cores stable. "We are racing the Reaper," she snarled, fingers flying, "and we can't afford to lose." Too many souls needed them. Too many souls were counting on them. They would make it. They had to. The X-Lock ship pushed their vessel to the brink. They tore through space, racing toward the civilian cruiser with everything their ship had left. They knew there was a chance they wouldn't arrive in time, but they refused to let the star claim the bodies without a fight. 2 hours after receiving the distress signal, they reached the last known location. There was nothing. The Stargo cruiser was gone. So were the escape pods. They called out over the radio, again and again and again. Silence. Everything was gone. All 2,567 lives aboard were gone. They edged closer to the star, as close as they dared without letting its gravity take them too, searching desperately, hoping to find even one survivor. They found nothing. Solemn silence filled every corridor, every hatch, every breath aboard the ship, until the radar specialist suddenly spoke. She had a ping, a human freighter vessel. It was moving toward the nearest station, though moving was generous. The ship was limping through space, its speed barely registering at 136 universal space knots, far below anything functional. They hailed it. After several tense moments, a response came through. "We are in critical condition. We are operating on emergency power and maneuvering thrusters only. Our main engines have failed. We require a tow. We have 1,802 souls aboard who need immediate medical care." The human language was harsh to X-Lock ears. The old distaste arose instinctively. Then Captain Gento froze. He processed the words again. 1,802 souls. His hand slammed down on the return channel. "You made it?" he demanded, his voice cracking despite himself. "You got them?" The bridge fell silent. Every X-Lock held their breath.
"We got them." The words were clear. The sigh of relief that followed was loud and heavy, rippling across the bridge. A cheer rose up, uncontrolled and raw, and Captain Gento immediately turned to make a call to his superiors, reporting that there had been survivors, that there had been recovery. Then they changed course toward the human cargo freighter. A tow had been requested, and by the fierce fire, they would get a tow. So she's gone. It wasn't a question. Maddie looked at the shipwright, and the Kester alien nodded, his tentacles writhing slowly around his head. There is no way to fix the damage. He repeated the list calmly. Cracked fusion cores, melted wiring, a partially liquefied hull, seized engines. The repairs would cost more than the ship was worth. Her ship was scrap. 100,000-ton paperweight. Maddie reached up and rested her hand against the bow. She could feel the ripples in the metal, warped and scarred where it had softened during the mad dash across space. She would never fly again. She had given her all to make it. They had, only just. They had recovered everything they could, refusing to let that star or the asteroid belt keep any of the dead they could reach. The cargo hold had been filled with escape pods, frozen bodies, and 1,802 X-locks. They were cold, they were terrified, but they were alive. I can purchase her for scrap value, the Kester spoke again. Maddie shook her head. Give me a moment. She waved him off and looked back up at the burnt, melted hull. She reached out and patted it gently. You did it, girl. You did it. She was done. She would never fly again. But she had done it. It must have been something special. The words barely registered through the rushed translation into X-lock as Maddie turned her head. A tall X-lock stood nearby, hands folded behind his back. His pale purple skin stood in sharp contrast to his dark captain's uniform. The ship. She was. Maddie turned back and gave the hull one final pat before letting her hand fall away. She. Humans always address their ships as female. They speak of them as if they have a soul. I think this one just might have had one. What she, did was impossible. He glanced at her. Maddie smiled, just slightly, soft and tired.
Well, she gave it her all, and then some. Humans believe that if a ship is coming to the rescue of those in trouble, the souls of all those lost at sea protect her, that the sea won't take her. It feels true, especially now. She wiped at her eyes, subtly. It was hard. The ship had been her dream. She had given her all to build her, and now she was done. That mad dash across space hadn't just crippled her, it had destroyed her. She did her job. She did what we asked of her. I can't ask her for anything else. She did her duty, and she made me proud. She had given everything. Her fusion cores had cracked. It was a miracle they hadn't exploded. They were a dull, smoky black now, no longer that pristine white. I have been given leave to offer you 18.5 million credits. The amount was hefty. Maddie looked at the X-lock in shock. For the ship. He studied her for a moment, then extended his hand. I'm Captain Gento. Do we have a deal? His voice was sharp. Maddie looked at his hand, then back at her ship. Part of her wanted to say no, to cling to the vessel that had given her everything, that had hauled itself across space to save 1,802 lives. She swallowed against the lump in her throat and looked back at the X-lock captain. Captain Gento, I'm Captain Matilda. Take care of her for me. She deserves to rest easy. She took his hand. They shook on it. She ordered her crew to clean out the ship, and to her surprise, the credits cleared into her account shortly after. She rented another cargo ship from the shipyard, just temporarily. They had cargo to retrieve from where it had been jettisoned, and a contract still to fulfill. But as they left the station, they all stood at the viewing screen and watched as the X-Lock vessel pulled Maddie's freighter from the dock, towing it behind their own sleek ship. Maddie discreetly wiped away the tears in her eyes. Her ship had given her everything. She only hoped the X-Locks would take care of her.
6 months later, Maddie looked up at the massive building before her. A formal invitation had summoned her to the Galactic Capital Center station. The station was nearly the size of a planet, and she had never been there before. She usually kept to the fringes of space, running her routes far from places like this. She glanced at Haneker, then at the rest of her crew. Every one of them had been invited. Apparently, there was to be some kind of formal ceremony. They had been told to dress well, so they had cleaned up, put on their best clothes, and made the trip together. Her new ship was nearly complete. She had built it as close to the original as possible, spending most of the credits the X-Locks had paid her. She couldn't wait to fly it. She was tired of renting ships just to keep her contracts fulfilled. But she pushed those thoughts aside as they entered the Grand Hall. The center was filled with dignitaries from countless species. Maddie felt almost out of place as an usher guided them to their seats. They were positioned surprisingly high, with a clear view of the central stage below. Moments after the doors sealed shut, an X-Lock delegate stepped onto a floating platform. Maddie felt a flicker of surprise at herself when she realized her usual distaste was gone. It had faded sometime after that mad dash across space, after being thanked and embraced by hundreds of X-Locks. They were just people, after all, like she was a person. Whatever grudge had existed now felt small, almost meaningless. A hush fell over the chamber as the delegate raised his hands. "We requested this formal ceremony for one reason and one reason only. 6 months ago, a civilian vessel, the Stargo cruiser, carrying 2,567 lives, had its systems knocked out by a solar flare originating from star B-105. When the cruiser drifted off course, an asteroid from the Axiom Belt cracked it in half. They were adrift, caught in the star's gravity, and no one was close." His words echoed through the vast space. Maddie's breath caught in her throat. "We had one of our own cargo vessels nearby, but not close enough to reach them in time." He paused. "There was another ship that was a fraction closer. They told the lives aboard the Stargo that they were coming, that they should hold on." The delegate turned and looked up toward Mattie's section. "And the crew of the human ship, HFY Carpathia, raced across space to try to save them. They were flying a cargo ship. Its top speed was 648 universal space knots. They were 1,066 nautical space miles away." He let the words settle. 2 hours. "I have learned, through my research, that humans believe neither the sea nor space will claim a vessel if that vessel is racing to rescue another, that the souls of those lost in such ways guide it safely onward, that their ships have a soul." His gaze rested on them, and Maddie had to look away, a tight lump forming in her throat. "I am inclined to believe this is true, because the crew of the HFY Carpathia pushed their ship beyond every known limit. They sealed off their mess hall. They diverted all power from life support and emergency systems to the fusion cores to give the ship just a little more. The crew piloted her wearing emergency spacesuits, surviving on backup oxygen alone." He paused, letting the weight of it settle.
The survivors of the Stargo cruiser told us that the vessel reached them just over 1 hour after the first call. They said her hull glowed orange, molten metal rippling across it, and that she arrived in a flash of light. Silence hung thick in the chamber. The captain was human, most of the crew was human, the ship was human, and I know that our species have had our disagreements, our conflicts, our history. His voice hardened for just a moment before softening again. But the FS Carpathia bent time and light to reach the survivors. I learned that the ship screamed, the engines screamed, the fusion cores screamed, just to keep pace, just to go faster. Mattie's shoulders trembled as she covered her face with her hands. Embarrassment and emotion tangled in her chest. She didn't know what she was supposed to feel. I learned, he continued, that when Captain Matilda was warned the ship might fall apart, she said, "Then we fall apart and get there in pieces." And again, when the ship shook and vibrated as though it wanted to tear itself apart, she said, "If she flies apart, then let her, and I'll see you in the great beyond, but we will make it in time." The chamber was utterly silent. "But the words that stayed with me the most," he said quietly, "were those spoken to her first mate just before the ship grew too loud for speech. They were, 'We are racing the Reaper, and we can't afford to lose.'" The words echoed across the vast hall. And they did not lose. They made it. They flew through the Axiom asteroid belt in a ship that was screaming, threatening to tear itself apart. They pulled escape pods from freefall into the star. They gathered our dead, and then they limped toward the nearest space station. What the FS Carpathia did was impossible, and it did break her. His voice lowered. She would never fly again, but she made it all the same. We purchased the ship from her captain afterward. Her fusion cores should have shattered, they should have exploded, but they did not. Instead, she reached a top speed of 1,055 universal space knots, and that speed caused her to melt her hull. Our scientists have no explanation for how or why the ship achieved that speed, or how it sustained it. His voice was almost reverent now. Mattie looked up from her hands, sniffing softly. Her girl really had given everything that day. "Our only belief," he said, "is that in that moment a soul was willed into her by her crew, that she was guided by those lost to space, by the fierce fire, by the many deities humans believe in. We believe she did it because her crew asked it of her, so they could save those who were about to be lost."
Our species lost 765 souls in that accident, the delegate said. One of the single greatest losses of life we have suffered in decades. He paused, steadying himself. But 1,802. That is how many X-Locks the FS Carpathia and her crew saved that day. 1,802 lives. His voice trembled just slightly. 650 of them were podlings, our children. A murmur rippled through the chamber. To show our deepest gratitude to the humans for the actions of some of their own, despite all the history between our species, who risked everything to save even one life. He gestured, and the floating platform rose as a human delegate stepped forward to join him. "I present this." The lights dimmed. "A memorial statue, forged from one of the FS Carpathia's cracked fusion cores. Its twin stands in our own capital, where the FS Carpathia herself is now stationed, as an empty ambassadorial vessel for Earth, should the humans agree to it."
A wave of shock swept through the assembly. Mattie felt it hit her like a physical force. She watched, stunned, as the human delegate crossed the stage, shook the X-Lock's hand, and then, without hesitation, they embraced. Behind them, a curtain fell away. The statue stood revealed, a human and an X-Lock side by side, hands raised, palms open together. Resting across them both was the fractured fusion core, scarred, cracked, and unmistakable. When the two delegates parted, the X-Lock smiled. Then he lifted his hand once more. And I wish everyone here to know just how deeply we as a collective species appreciate the actions and the indomitable human spirit of Captain Matilda and her crew. He turned, his gaze locking upward. They bent light and time. They broke the laws of physics. They willed a soul into a ship so that others might live. Thank you. A spotlight snapped on. Mattie froze as light flooded their section. She looked at her crew, faces red, eyes shining, just as overwhelmed and embarrassed as she felt. Applause thundered around them, rolling through the chamber like a tidal wave. 20 minutes later, the X-Lock delegate stood before them in a quiet antechamber. One by one, he embraced them. The gesture was warm, sincere, unexpected. When he reached Mattie, he held on just a moment longer before stepping back. His eyes were glassy. My brother and my niece were aboard the Stargo cruiser. My brother did not survive, but my niece did, because he shoved her into the last escape pod. Mattie's breath caught. And you pulled that pod back from the gravity of the star. You found my brother's body drifting in space and brought him home to us. We were able to lay him to rest. His voice broke. But more than that, my niece is alive because of you, because of all of you. So many families are still whole because of what you did. Mattie swallowed hard, her throat tightening until it hurt. We do it again, she said, clearing her voice. She looked down the line of her crew. One by one, they nodded. No hesitation, no doubt. It was worth it, she said, every bit of it. And if we had to go back, we would, 100,000 different times. Because that was what was right. That was what it meant to sail the stars.
The delegate looked them over, as if trying to memorize their faces. We heard stories of the impossible actions humans could take to save others. We thought they were just tales, just bravado and arrogance. I'm glad they weren't, and I am glad you were there, that you were all there to give the Carpathia her soul that day, a heart, that you risked your lives to save just one, because it has changed everything, more than you can possibly know. He grasped Mattie's shoulder and squeezed it, almost fondly, before he walked away. 2 ships, 1 human, 1 X-Lock, and 1 mad dash across the cosmos to save people in distress, even if it was just one. That was all it took to break over 70 years of strife between the 2 species. And now, when one of them needs help, they look to the other first before any other, because they know, deep down, that their alliance was forged in the cracking of fusion cores, the screaming of engines, and the melted hull of a ship that was asked to do the impossible, and the will of the captain and crew that made it happen anyway.